Potter syndrome. What do you mean, versus? In our previous discussion, we just talked about unilateral renal agenesis. Let's go on to talk about bilateral renal agenesis. The story not so good, huh? Not so good. Let me walk you through this. You'll like this. I'm here to give you clinical information. I'm trying to give you how you can identify your patient the quickest so that you can come up with the proper diagnosis and implement management when necessary. The management here, not a whole lot that you can do, really. And what's happening? Well, here, both the kidneys are missing. When? In utero. In utero. So the fetus within the pregnant woman is missing both kidney. I need you to think of amniotic fluid and its circulation as being very, very primitive and simple for learning purposes, okay? Now, if you want to know more, then you do that on your own time. But for right now, for the sake of time, we need to make sure that we go through this effectively. Okay, so what's happening? Amniotic fluid is what you're thinking of. This is a fetus. This is a fetus that is going to be consuming the amniotic fluid, which contains the nutrients that it requires. It is then going to, quote-unquote, urinate the amniotic fluid. It is a continuous cycle. A continuous cycle. Now, what does it mean to have amniotic fluid in your placenta? You call this amnios, right? Amnios. And you can have two different clinical manifestations upon ultrasound. A ligo or too much, poly. So poly or ligo. Well, you do an ultrasound on this pregnant woman, and you find that the amniotic fluid, amnios, is too little. Which one's too little? The poly or the ligo? Oligo is too little, isn't it? You've heard of oliguria, oligomenorrhea, oligohydramnios. So you have oligohydramnios. What happened? Both the kidneys aren't present in the fetus. Oh, not good. So what's happening? You don't have as much amniotic fluid that's being, quote-unquote, urinated out. Think of it as such, please, so that you never miss this question. Now what happens? Now the devastation begins. What do I mean by that? This amniotic fluid is not present. The placenta is now crushing the fetus, crushing it. My world is caving in upon me everywhere. So what does that mean? Flattened faces, recessed chin, low set ears. What about the lungs? Good. Hypoplasia. Welcome to Potter's sequence. Not a single thing did you need to memorize here, except for maybe the name Potter. But everything else, bilateral renal agenesis, then it's a story. Oligohydramnios, you have a very small world that this fetus is living in, to the point it's crushing the baby. You're going to have what we just talked about, where you have flattened faces, recessed chin, flattened nose, and we have pulmonary hypoplasia. Death. Not good. Potter syndrome. So what's happening along with this? Well, I need you to think of the development of the kidney as being two stages, okay? What does a diverticulum mean to you? An outpouching. Tell me a couple important places in pathology where diverticulum becomes quite common for us. Well, we might have a diverticulum in the esophagus, and that's called Zenker diverticulum. You might have a diverticuli down in the intestine for a couple of reasons. Maybe it's Meckel's diverticulum, and that'll be a remnant of the Vitellin duct. You with me? Or you could have a diverticulum because in the Western diet, we have lots of consumption of meat with perhaps only a little bit of fiber. So you're sitting there going, all of the time and constipated. That's a lot of pressure that you're putting in the intestine. Could I be any more dramatic? So what happens in the intestine? Down by the left lower quadrant, you might have an outpouching, a diverticulum. So what is a diverticulum? My question stands, is an outpouching. So with the kidney, you'll have the ureteric bud. I want you to close your eyes, think of the ureter, and that is being developed by the metanephric diverticulum. It is an actual outpouching, ureteric bud, that is then going to come in, and it is going to hook up with the blastema. That's your metanephrogenic blastema. Now, what does that mean to you? The ureteric bud, which is the diverticulum, at least get that out of the way, is going to give rise to the distal portion of the nephron. So that'll be your ureter, that'll be the calyces, and that'll be, all the stuff that's going on in the pelvis. Whereas the metanephrogenic blastema is going to give rise to the proximal portion of the nephron. What may then happen if the two are not going to properly meet? And there you have it. You have a diverticulum, which is then going to punch a hole into the blastema. And as long as those two are going to communicate, you have a perfectly formed communicative nephron. What if it doesn't happen? Well, if it doesn't happen, then the kidney is not functioning properly. It is as simple as that. I need you to know from embryo and congenitally these two structures and what it represents, please. It's amazing as to how many different times that it will come into play. Now, at some point, when we get into what we're seeing here with the letters and such, for example, here's letter A, and that then gives you the two different components that are not united. What two components? The diverticulum, the ureteric bud, a.k.a., and then the blastema. And then by the time you get to letter D, you'll notice that there's perfect communication between the diverticula and the blastema. That's all that I wish for you to take out of this particular illustration. If you want to know further detail, then here it is for your preference.